Hi there, welcome to Jurisprudence, class of 2022. My name is Karau Masnelwana, and I'll be one of your lecturers taking you through the course for the year. So, I thought I'd record this video just to give you a bit of insight as to what you should expect within the year, particularly from a course such as Jurisprudence, because obviously at this stage you will have only just started your law degree, and within that, your law career. So, in order to put into perspective for you, I think it would be very important to look at the role of jurisprudence, particularly when you look at the current debates that are happening within our country. Now, when you're thinking current debates happening within our country, think about, for instance, if you will, the letter written by the Minister of Tourism, Lindiwe Sisulu, where she openly criticizes the judiciary and their role within the transformative project of South Africa. Think about the attacks that she then places on the Constitution itself. And then within all of that, take a moment to read The Selfless Constitution by Prof. Sue Woolman, understanding that these are not new debates, nor do they find themselves rooted in capricious air, though the historical nature of them does require us to take cognizance of them. And I think it is very important for you, then, as aspiring legal experts, to then find yourself a stance within the debates that happen. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Look at the statutes that we have, the regulations that we have, the different judgments that we have, all the things that make up our jurisprudence as a country, and then ask yourself, in a particular case, would you have agreed with the bench if you're sitting on the bench? If you were part of counsel, would you have agreed with the reasoning put forward by counsel? Would you have different reasoning, which would have just been as compelling? And within that, you then start to develop your acumen, your jurisprudential acumen, in terms of then being able to represent your clients fully. Now, a bit more about the overview of what to expect within the course this year, right? Um, so, in the briefest of sense, um, as you'll see within the introduction, once you then read the course outline, is that the focus almost like shifts from us firstly concentrating on traditional jurisprudence and legal theory and theories of justice, right? Stricto sensu. And then bringing our thinking to engage with critical approaches and theories of law and justice. That's the first focus. And then our shift will then demand that we fundamentally question the work that law does and what possibilities lie within the dominant legal framing of law and constitutionalism. Now, all that in mind, it is very important that you do your readings at every stage. It is very important that you understand the premise and the conclusions that the authors of the different pieces make and conclude. And also find yourself a position as to whether you agree or disagree with what is being put forward. And as a point of entry, so into this critical enterprise, we will endeavor to situate our discussions broadly into the current South African moment as we critically ask ourselves what we understand the contribution or imagination of jurisprudence to be. Um, Particularly asking, how does our study of jurisprudence help us to understand ourselves, our positionality, and our standing as individual agents? How does it contribute to our understanding of the society that we actually live in? And further, how does it help us to understand and unpack our legal systems and norms as against the ideals it espouses rhetorically. Now, a lot of this will have remnants of the Constitution and the current attack. But once again, though that is present, it is very important that we start way back. And one of the main questions that we then frame as part of our themes is, why do we obey the law? And stated differently, and possibly a different stance, is why we ought to obey the law. Why do we obey the law? Why we ought to obey the law. And so have these two themes in mind as we go through the first part of the year, as we start reading about authors such as H.L.A. Hart, Austen, and the likes. It may be a bit intimidating, but take the time to go through the readings and digest what is firstly written on paper. And then after that, try and read for understanding. If you do not understand a sentence, you might not necessarily understand the sentiment. So therefore, pause at each stage. After reading something, ask yourself, do I understand what is being said? Enough for me to at least move on to the next sentence to then understand the sentiment that is then built on. So with that said, do not hesitate to get in touch with us in terms of assistance. We will be having tutorials and different sort of aids. So do enjoy the year. We have an open door policy in terms of communications. I know Prof. Willman is the type of person who will respond to emails all up until 2 a.m. in the mornings. Bearing in mind that at some stages that was due to time differences. But for this year, I'm hoping that we'll run a more coordinated ship in terms of there not being a need for superfluous emailing outside of what is needed in terms of assistance and the assistance that would be expected from lecturers towards students. And with that said, it's very important that we also talk about reciprocal duties. One main duty being preparing before class. Now, the duty does exist in terms of professors and lecturers then preparing prior to class to make sure that the class goes accordingly and in a structured manner, and that the outcomes of the class are reached, the learning outcomes particularly. But this is all based on the understanding that students, on the other hand, have a corollary understanding that they too have a responsibility to make sure that they do prepare. Now, part of the biggest preparation for class is doing the readings. I cannot stress this enough, particularly as a student who's just recently graduated myself, and I understand how it is very easy to fall behind. You skip one reading and you think you'll catch up, but then you have more readings piled on by the next course that you go to, and it keeps going on and on and on and on and on. So take a moment, take stock, start prioritizing your readings, start setting up a timetable that is heavily based on readings. Previously, you will have gone through a lot of tutorials, and your time would have been split up between doing readings and doing actual tutorials. As time has progressed, I think the leaning has been more towards the readings and less tutorials. But nonetheless, it is still up to you to develop this balance within your studies. And I'm hoping with that said that you will once again not treat me as a stranger that's trying to hug you in public as I try and embrace you and say to you that we do have an open door policy. So always feel free to make contact and communication wherever necessary. And all the best for this year. And I'm looking forward to sharing many, many interactions with you all. Take care now.